Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimaloye in Lagos. Welcome to the very first Sunday show of the year 2020, a year which ushers in a new decade, which I believe holds very great potentials for Nigeria and its citizens. Thank you so much everyone for watching. Wherever you may be watching around the world, welcome to the program. President Muhammadu Buhari gave his plans for the year 2020. Expectations are high, and the president has made several promises in his New Year message to the nation. President Buhari has assured Nigerians that he will leave office in 2023, but says that he is determined to help strengthen the electoral process both in Nigeria and across the African region. He said that he's in his New Year letter to Nigerians, which was released by the presidency. He says, and I quote, "I will be standing down in 2023 and will not be available in any future elections." In his letter, which he titled "A Letter from the President at New Year," President Buhari stated his primary concern as the security of the nation and the safety of its citizens. President Buhari has promised to strengthen the fight against violent extremism and other forms of insecurity in the country in order to ensure the safety of all Nigerians, he said. The president asked Nigerians to expect to see certain infrastructure projects this year, including 47 road projects to be completed between 2020 and 2021. We'll be dissecting some of these things, he said, later on the program. Major bridges, he said, it's going to be concluded. Substantial work on the second Niger Bridge, completion of the 13 housing estates under the National Housing Project Plan, and the commission of the Lagos, Kano, Maiduguri, and Enugu International Airport, amongst others. Talking about leaving office in 2023, President Buhari has been advised to ensure that he makes a good succession plan. Today, a lawyer and Pentecostal pastor, Tunde Bakare, is advising the president to protect his legacies.
Session of leaders who piloted China's economic transformation, including the current President Xi Jinping. Without their foresight, we will not be running to China today to finance our short-sightedness. We must also learn from Nelson Mandela, who stepped aside after one term, but now without positioning the likes of Thabo Mbeki and Cyril Ramaphosa. We must learn from the success story of Singapore, whose former Prime Minister, Goh Chok Tong, once said, "Mr. Lee Kuan Yew has always emphasized political succession. And when I took over likewise, I planned for succession." Prime Minister Lee is also working very hard to plan for succession. Therefore, even as we build institutions of democratic governance, a key responsibility that history has bestowed on President Muhammadu Buhari at this turning point in our journey to nationhood is to institutionalize systems of accurate succession that will build and sustain the Nigeria we desire, not the ones that will hand us over again to treasury looters. This is a task that must be done.
Okay then, you heard the advice coming from Pastor Tunde Bakare, the man who said to have visited the president a few days ago. And also remember that Pastor Tunde Bakare at some point wanted to be president. Well, Tunde Bakare is the founder and the senior pastor of the Latter Rain Assembly in Lagos. He listed those he named the enemies of Nigeria in his New Year message.
At the state level, the true enemies of Nigeria are those state governments that feed fat on unaccounted for security votes, those who deploy the paraphernalia of office in their selfish interest rather than in the service of the people, those who connive with zonal political oligarchs to personalize and privatize the state, those who deploy the force of state to quell dissent, those who paralyze local governance structures in such a manner that discredits genuine arguments for restructuring and devolution of powers, those who give critics an excuse to postulate that if state governments are already abusing the little power they currently wield, what will they do if we devolve yet more powers to them? These power-drunk state officials are the true enemies of Nigeria.
Indeed, enemies of Nigeria. There have been a series of reactions to the president's New Year message and his plans for the year 2020. The PDP says they cannot wait for the president and his party, the APC, to leave power in 2023. And the president, according to the PDP, does not need to tell the nation that he's leaving in 2023 because, according to them, he's sacrosanct that he will end his tenure, second term in office, in 2023. The series of issues on the table as regarding 2020, President Muhammadu Buhari, the task on the burden of governance, and where we're headed for 2020. Let's get some perspectives on these issues, everyone. Some of the issues raised from the president's agenda for Nigeria. I'm being joined on the program tonight by our former Minister of Aviation, Mr. Osita Chidoka. He joins us from our Abuja studio and is also the advisor to the PDP National Chairman on External Engagement. Thank you so much. A Happy New Year to you, former Minister. Let's begin the conversation around what the president said. For example, what he said regarding 2023. He said he will leave office. Your party has come to say, look, that is sacrosanct. He must leave office at the end of 2023. Well, Mr. Oshiomhole, Adams Oshiomhole, the APC national chairman, said your party, the PDP, planted the idea of the third-term agenda in Nigeria. You've heard Pastor Tunde Bakare also talk about 2023 and the need for President Buhari to secure his legacies by planning succession. What are your thoughts?
First, I want to say Happy New Year to all, and to you particularly, Shehu. It's my pleasure to be back here early in the year for us to continue the conversation and engagement. First of all, I want to say that the president's letter and the statement that he will be stepping down in 2023 is a rather strange statement, because expectation is that he will be stepping down after his constitutionally confirmed 2 tenures in office. So I don't know why he had to make that statement. But the second part of the statement, which says he will be strengthening democracy in West Africa and supporting other African countries for democracy, comes at a almost a cynical statement. Cynical because we just finished 2 elections in Nigeria, Bayelsa and Kogi State. The shameful election in Kogi State was viewed by many, including international observers, that Nigeria has gone below where they were in 2015. All international observers to elections in Nigeria said the 2019 election was a step behind what happened in 2015. We had expected that the president, having gone through cycles of elections and losing those elections, should have been in the forefront of electoral reforms in Nigeria. I don't know what he's going to export to West African countries. I don't know whether it will be the type of election we saw people shooting at Kogi State. I don't know whether it is what we saw in Bayelsa that he will be exporting to other West African nations. So I'm yet to understand clearly why the president has not thought it wise to start the reforms of INEC. President Yar'Adua, who came into office in 2007, said the election that brought me to power was flawed, and he set up a panel to look into INEC. And they made a series of recommendations, Justice Uwe's committee, and those recommendations are still valid. We need to unbundle INEC. We need to make progress in our technologies in managing elections in Nigeria. We need to increase the transparency of elections and the credibility of our elections. But the result so far, starting from 2019 election, has been that the result has not been a very good one. Everybody, international observers, local observers have given up. Nobody talked about the results from Kogi State or Bayelsa because we knew that these were not elections in the way elections are supposed to be done. So really, I'm at loss what he plans to export to the West African countries. On the other part, he talked about the infrastructure projects that he will be completing in 2020. And I was very happy. He mentioned the airport projects that we started. He mentioned the 47 roads that he's currently building. But what I was waiting to hear is what I consider the debt profile of Nigeria. The difference between APC and PDP has become clear to Nigerians. While the PDP was a fiscally responsible party that started the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that paid off our international debt, that brought Nigeria back to respectability of maintaining high levels of excess crude accounts and also high levels of sovereign wealth fund and also high levels of foreign reserves. We've seen a government that has gone on massive borrowing to fund projects. Now, there is no problem with borrowing except that we need to have a plan. How are these debts going to be paid back? These debts are not going to be paid back in the next 3 years. So who is he keeping these debts for? Because this is going to crystallize someday. As at 2000, Nigeria could not even afford to to pass its budget without the IMF and World Bank conditionalities. Are we getting back to the stage now where after the 30 billion request is approved, Nigeria's debt rises astronomically, going towards where Argentina was before they had a sovereign wealth default? I had expected the letter of the president to tackle the issue of his plan to handle the debt burden in Nigeria. We have a debt crisis staring us in the face, and we need to know how we're going to manage those debts. We cannot yank off the infrastructure. We cannot take off the rail lines and return them to the Chinese when they are not paying for itself. So we need to know what is the plan to pay back this debt. And that, for me, was a very missing information in the letter to the country. Lastly, I saw what Pastor Bakare said. And unfortunately, I'm at loss how to comment on issues by pastors who speak from the pulpit. I have a very religious family, so I don't know how to go about that. But let me just suggest that, let me point out rather that the examples he cited, Singapore, China, are not examples any Nigeria should look into. Our examples should be like India, more like the rancorous democracy of India, where the people have voted out the Congress party after many years in office and have brought the BJP to power. We need to look at democracy from the point of view that there is no successful case in Nigeria where a governor had been able to anoint a successor. Obasanjo tried it with Yaradua, and he was almost breaking down before the events that transpired. All over Nigeria, all the state governors that have tried to put in successors have led us to failure. So what we really need in Nigeria is a public sector that works. It's an electoral system that allows the people to vote in who they want. The advice that it should interfere in the 2023 election is rather unfortunate. It is the advice that shouldn't come from any credible Nigerian. What Nigerians should be doing is like the Americans do. Presidents don't give a damn about who is going to be the successor. They face their work as presidents, and they allow the electoral process to go on. Once the people make their choice, they live with their choice, provided that the electoral process is free and fair. So the commitment he needs to give to Nigeria is that there will be free and fair elections, allowing Nigerians, if they believe in his model, to elect a leader who flies on his banner, or if they agree on another model, to elect that leader who brings to them what is important to them. I don't think that anybody should cite the example of China. It is not a democracy. Singapore is a quasi-democracy. These are state-led institutions, and this is where an ethnic group is a dominant force. It is a mono-ethnic society in China. The Singaporeans, the Chinese are the largest ethnic groups, and they have imposed their will on the others and tried to manage the differences. So we need a system that takes in our cultural differences, takes in our ethnic and religious diversities, and creates a level playing field for Nigerians to express themselves at the ballot boxes. I think the advice by Pastor Bakare is an advice President Buhari should reject in all its entirety. And finally, I hope that he will, in reading that letter, realize that there is need for him to engage Nigerians more. I had expected that the handlers of the president, instead of holding him up in Abuja, would have allowed him to go to Lagos for Christmas, would have allowed him to visit his vice president in his village, or come to the east for Christmas, to be the father of the nation. Nigeria is at pains. We need healing. He needs to be the father to the nation. Sitting in the villa and sending us letters is not going to cut it. We need to see our president. He shouldn't be quick to travel abroad for meetings. He should also be quick to visit other parts of Nigeria. What would have been wrong for him to have been in Calabar or Akwa Ibom, for instance, during the Christmas celebrations, just to show that he is the father of modern Nigeria. And I'm sure that he has missed that opportunity. I hope he doesn't miss it in the remaining 2 years of his time as president.
Let me get your view, because a lot of leadership development experts would say one of the most credible or the most important item that a leader can sell to his people is hope. the president said in that statement that it's a time of hope, optimism, and fresh possibilities. Did you see that resonate?
Sorry, the audio was weak. I didn't hear you very well. Could you just repeat the last few sentences?
Let me take the question again. I made reference to what development and leadership experts will say. They will say that citizens need hope to be preached or to be traded to their followers. And the president in that statement said it is time of hope, optimism, and fresh possibilities. In that statement the president made, and in the activities of the APC-led government, have you seen hope resonate?
Well, the letter did not, if the aim, it was beautiful language by the speechwriters, but it didn't reflect the reality on ground. The reality on ground today is that Nigerians are not hopeful. The reality on ground today is that Nigerians are afraid of what the year has in stock for them. And this is not because the president said so. What is important, and I think what the handlers missed, is that there is a lot more to symbolism than there is to making statements. For instance, the president, the chief of army staff, the inspector general of police, should have gone on road trips across the regions that are tough in Nigeria to reassure Nigerians that you are free to move around freely in Nigeria. There is no hope that can come from beautiful language. Hope comes when people see that what is important to them, what is key to their survival, what is key to their economic well-being is being looked after. Now, the president in his letter talked about
butt in quickly.
hope and
Sorry.
optimism.
All right. If I may butt in, please, because the APC will say to you that they are trying to fix several years of what they will refer to as looting of the treasury. In fact, the APC national chairman has said when the issue of third time came up, that is, in fact, the idea of the PDP. The APC will quick to say that if there is no hope in the country, it's because the PDP has mismanaged the country. How would you react to such a statement?
Well, it is normal for any party in power to look for enemies. When we were in power, when PDP was in power, the only people we could refer to was the military years. But you knew, 3 years after President Obasanjo's first term, Nigerians were tired of listening about the military. They said, okay, we've elected you. We want you to do your own. I remember when Governor Tinubu was governor in 1999, and he kept talking about Marwa's tenure. And Lagosians were like, please, enough of Marwa. Tell us what you are here for. So the PDP story is an unfortunate narrative. Very unfortunate narrative in that the narrative about the fact that PDP restored this country out of a debt-ridden country to a low-debt country was something that is significant. When we got the windfall of oil boom of $18 billion, we used it to pay off Nigeria's $30 billion debt. And don't forget, other countries tried to get the debt relief, and they didn't get it. It is important to also note that it was this same PDP that looked at the issues of corruption. The cases that brought Governor Joseph Kalu to prison, Governor Nyame, Governor Dariye, were all started under the PDP government. It is important also to let Nigerians not to forget that it was PDP government that said, when we make a budget and there is extra money from the oil sales, we should have an excess crude account. And that stabilized Nigeria in 2008.
I think it's a good point, Mr. Chidoka, Mr. Chidoka, to take a breather. Apologies, please. We need to take a break. Let's continue with the conversation with former Aviation Minister, Mr. Osita Chidoka, who is also the special advisor to the PDP National Chairman on external engagement. We had to go on that break, and I wanted you to get back on your line of thought about what you think about the manner in which President Muhammadu Buhari is handling the affairs of the country. 2020 is going to be a year that a lot of the promises will be brought to the fore, and reminders will be set about the promises. Please go ahead with your thought.
Thank you very much. And so what we need to really focus on as we progress as a country is that if you look at any country that is heterogeneous like Nigeria, the first principle, the first task is to manage diversity. You need to manage diversity to be able to get everybody on board. You need to harness the energies of the whole country to get everybody on board to move in the same direction. Now, you never get everybody on board, but you get most of the people on board when you harness the innate capacities of the country that is locked in our diversity. And part of the way Nigerians have come to deal with their diversity is that we have institutionalized a process of what we call federal character system. I mean, it is not normal that affirmative actions last forever. We have the educational disadvantaged areas in admissions. We have the issue of merit and the issue of quota systems to make sure that no part of the country is left behind. So it is important that as a leader, the first task, if you want 2020 to be the year of recovery, is to first of all handle the issues of Nigeria's diversity. Reflect in your being and in the attitude of the government the diversity of Nigerians. It is an important thing to do as we go forward. And I don't think that the president's speech makers, speechwriters are speaking the language of inclusion. I mean, there was no need to make the reference to the last National Assembly who kept a budget for 7 months in the speech. Because if you really look at it, aside from 2017, aside from maybe 2018 budget, the president had never submitted his budget anything earlier than December any year to the National Assembly. In 2016, in 2018, in 2019, he submitted it in 2018 to 19. He submitted it in December. And most times the budgets go back to him and they come back. And meanwhile, when the budgets are passed, they are passed for a 12-month cycle. So it doesn't matter whether it starts from January or February. The budget allows you to make the expenditure between the time it is passed for a 12-month cycle. What we need now in the country is for the president to galvanize Nigerians, to move Nigerians away from fractious disagreements to a concrete direction that leads us to having what I will call a national consensus. A national consensus is critical. It is the overarching template upon which everything that the government is planning can work. And coming down again to the specifics, I think that emphasis is being laid too much on projects that are not tied to clear outcomes. So the president talks about roads to the ports. But for instance, Apapa has been rendered totally uninhabitable. Nobody can live in Apapa today because of the way the impact of the externalities of the port. Now, it is not the problem of this, it wasn't caused by this government. It is that when we built the Apapa port, when we built the Tinkan Island, Chief Obafemi Awolowo used to live on Park Lane in Apapa. Nobody of good standing in Nigeria today can live in Apapa. So what I would have thought is that the government will have been thinking, beyond talking about Executive Order 007, is to think about how can the two great institutions that benefit from Apapa, the Nigerian Ports Authority and the Nigerian Customs, how can they bring about the funding for us to restore Apapa to some semblance of a city so that the traffic that we see every day lining up on Ikorodu Road going to Apapa can be ameliorated. It is not. There is always externalities when you build things like ports. But the customs make over close to $1 trillion from Apapa. NPA makes all their money from Apapa. How can't a section of this money be allocated together with Lagos State to restore Apapa, to make sure that the externalities of our country's income sources, our country's gateway to the world, does not
Mr. Chidoka, let's talk about a few, one or two issues before we close this segment and get my other guests on the program tonight. Is there any credit you would give to this government of Muhammadu Buhari and the APC on some of the promises they made and perhaps what they are doing? Would you say that this country is on the right track under the Buhari-led government?
I'm sorry if I disappoint you, but I don't think the country is on the right path. I don't think the country is on a sustainable debt path. The debt profile of the country is going to create a debt crisis. The decision to keep maintaining a costly fuel subsidy is going to impact negatively on our country's finances sooner than later. The decision not to allow the markets to determine carefully with controlled efforts in allowing pricing to reflect the reality of our economic situation. The decision to maintain dual foreign exchange rates at 305 and at 360 is going to impact on this country negatively. I think that Nigeria's debt profile is totally unsustainable. The government is in the wrong direction.
I would like
They
you
need
to touch
retrace
on
their
before
steps
we
now. They
apologies.
need to have a conversation about the direction of the country.
There's another issue I would like you to touch on before we close. The president, in his New Year's speech, said that during his Democracy Day speech on June 12, 2019, he promised to lay enduring foundations for taking 100 million Nigerians out of mass poverty over the next 10 years. He said on that day that he's restating that commitment. And he's talking about how he's met international partners to ensure that that happened. Did you see that happening under this government?
So it can't happen. The unsustainable debt profile is going to put more people in debt and going to put more people in poverty. The fuel subsidy, which is actually a subsidy to the rich, is going to put more people in poverty. The money that should go for education, the money that should go for healthcare is locked into the fuel subsidy. So we need to have a conversation about how the country's economy, which direction the country's economy is heading to. Are we going to go back to the years when we had excess crude accounts, when we had savings, or are we going to go back to the years before the military left office when we were at unsustainable debt models? And I think it is important that for the country to talk about lifting people out of poverty, we need to focus about allowing the economy to be private sector led. And so far, the regulatory environment in Nigeria is unpredictable. You cannot predict
former minister, and the question is going to be the thought of Pastor Tunde Bakare on the president planning a proper succession to keep his legacies or leave an enduring legacies for Nigerians. So where does this leave your party? And in the equation, the political equation of Nigeria, there are fears that having had President Muhammadu Buhari, who was run for office for 2 terms of what is going to expire in 2023 as 8 years in office, perhaps there are tendencies that power will stay back in the northern region of the country. Do you have that fears, or you think it's going to go south?
Well, first of all, like I said earlier on, the views of Pastor Bakare is rather unfortunate. The president, for his own legacy, should abstain from interfering with the process that will bring out a successor. Let Nigerians make their choice. All that he should promise Nigerians and deliver to Nigerians is free and fair, credible elections, which I think is becoming difficult, but I pray in the last 2 years of his regime and looking towards a legacy that will outlive him, the most important will be for free and fair elections. I do not think he should listen to the advice of anybody telling him to anoint a successor or to find those that will lead the country to sustain his legacy. His legacies will live in the hearts of those who has been impacted by his government. People talk about General Murtala Mohammed today. He wasn't looking at our legacies. He was just doing what he needed to do as a president.
Let him do his job. We'll leave it at that at the moment. Mr. Osita Chidoka, former Minister of Aviation and the Special Advisor to the PDP National Chairman on External Engagement. Thank you so much for your thought tonight.